You're listening to the Entrepreneurs Next Door podcast.
Work's been breaking my back, already packing my bags. Punch that time card like a ticket out of here.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Entrepreneurs Next Door podcast with Mitch Gorshin. His perspective on success, creative drive, and family are gold. Not many people in downtown Haddonfield have the backstory of this living legend. I don't want to give away too much, but wait until you hear about the project he spearheaded for the U.S. Navy. Please enjoy. Mitch, thank you for cutting out the time on a Friday morning. We do appreciate it, and here in your awesome shop. So thank you for hopping on our podcast. This is Barry Hoover with Mitch Gorshin here in downtown Haddonfield. And Mitch, for all those listening here, you know, when we sit down with people that they might not necessarily have any type of conversation with you beforehand, and I've had the privilege of doing that actually for a couple of years. You know, we've actually been able to work together on some random things that we've overlapped on, and every time I leave a conversation with you, I feel encouraged, you know, nice. I feel like, man, that guy's so cool, you know, and me and my wife would always talk about what makes that cool thing about you, and with every project you do, you see more and more angles of you, and so that's what I'm hoping to have listeners get from you today, and so no pressure to have you communicate all that coolness. But I know it just naturally comes.
I'll be understated.
Yeah, you'll be understated. Try and keep that that persona. And so if I could lead off with something here, as we are in Haddonfield, New Jersey in 2018, you don't just kind of pop up somewhere. That's just not really how things happen. And so to lead off with a big giant question, big softball, big beach ball of a question, that path to as we know you today, where did that journey start for you? At what age did the whole creative journey start as far as entrepreneurial spirit? I would love to hear the birthplace of all those things.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'll be back in 45 minutes. I'm just going to...
All right, grab me a coffee while you're
Another coffee.
Thank you. Well, it's interesting, I guess, I was born into a creative family. So I've been around it ever since I was a kid. Dad was an actor. I was born in Hollywood, California. All of his friends were actors and actresses. And it was just the world that I lived in. I went to a school where celebrities in their own right would go, or sons and daughters of such would go. I went to school with Tatum O'Neal and Jodie Foster and all kinds of really interesting people. So creativity and all that stuff was always around me. It felt like the norm. It wasn't something I had to seek. It was just everywhere. But I remember as a small kid, Dad would take me to the set of whatever he would happen to be working on. And so at a real young age, I'd be at 20th Century Fox or Paramount while he's shooting sitcoms from the 70s and so forth. And he would, his gig was in front of the camera. That was his thing. Acting was his passion. That's what he loved, and he was really, really good at it. But every time he took me, my interest was I was less interested in what Dad was doing. It's okay, go do your thing, Dad. I'm watching the guy that's operating the camera. I'm watching how sets are being built, how the costumes are being made, how this whole production, this thing that we're sitting in, comes to life. And that just kind of held with me, and it really started to spark creative energy in me, and I guess that's where it really began.
When you say too, when you being born into it, a creative type of, you have a creative DNA. At what point did you kind of recognize that that's not everyone's story? where it was like, okay, this is a gifting, like this is there's a fire in your belly for these things. Was that later on where you kind of like didn't really notice it until a certain point, or was there a point in time where you're like, this actually clicked?
Well, it's interesting. Like I said, I'm born in Hollywood. I grew up in Santa Monica, and in my world were all creative types. People were in and out of the industry, and that was the thing, including all of my folks' friends. It wasn't until we moved to Connecticut. I grew up surfing and skateboarding and all that stuff, and then Dad's passion was Broadway. And that's what he loved most, more than TV, more than film, being on stage live. That was his passion. He loved the fact that on a Broadway play, that during an evening performance, something could go wrong, and you had to deal with it.
You had to deal with it, yeah.
The lights didn't hit, somebody forgot something or whatever, and he loved that sort of energy behind it. But in any case, we moved to Connecticut. And of all places, Greenwich, Connecticut. So I'm going from Santa Monica, yo, what's up, dude, and to, the land of hedge funds and things like that. So it was a big cultural shift. But I loved it. As a kid, you're resilient. You're like, okay, this is great. For the first time, I was experiencing where I lived 4 seasons. Fall came, and the smell, and the pumpkins, and the apples, much like what we're about to enter now, which is still intoxicating to me. We'd get snow and spring, and it was fabulous, absolutely fabulous. But there in Connecticut, all of my friends, their parents were in finance. They were doctors, they were lawyers, they were everything but being in the entertainment circle. So it was a complete shift. And it wasn't until, and I wanted to follow suit. So I'm going into middle school and high school. And all my friends are studying business, they're doing pre-med programs, they're doing all this kind of stuff. So I'm like, gee, that's interesting, that's neat. And I always had sort of an interest in a medical profession. So when it came to college time, I went to 3 different schools. I started off as a pre-med student at Kenyon College. And I did that, but I knew that's not what I wanted to do. Then from there, I moved into another, field that I thought was interesting, which was engineering. So I studied aeronautical engineering out in Arizona at Embry-Riddle. Did that for a year. I said, nah, that's not for me. And I was missing that creative component that I grew up with as a kid. So ultimately, I went to the New York School of Visual Arts in Manhattan and studied photography and film. And later on, the combination of the art school and the engineering really brought me down into the Walt Disney Company to fuse those 2 ideas and those 2 interests of mine together into this sort of industrial entertainment, if you will.
Right. Whenever we've had a chance to talk about all things Disney, most people just go to the experience they've had as little ones there, right? When it's like they think of their favorite ride, and of course, I want to hear one of the favorite projects you worked on down there. Like one you can tell us one that you've just absolutely love above the rest. But most people don't have the perspective that you have of Disney insofar as it being, a professional outlet. Could you kind of unpack that a little bit? Like, what does that really mean to be able to have those 2 things fused together, creativity, finance, business, entrepreneurial, in a Disney dynamic? Like, could you unpack that for the regular person?
Yeah, it's again, going back to what I said when I was a little kid, I was intrigued with the cameraman and all that stuff and how things came to be. For me, Disney was a lot of the same. It's like, okay, I get it. On the surface, there's giant emotional connection across from infants to the great grandmas and grandpas that go there. And whether it's they grew up with Snow White or they have some sort of thing for Small World, Pirates of the Caribbean, what have you, I get that. That's that surface layer. And you always the best critique that I heard from guests at Disney, where they couldn't put their finger on it. They say, I don't know what it is about this place, but I just love it. And I'm like, that's great. That's a great comment. That means everything kind of works. It's not like, well, I love the restaurant over in Tomorrowland, fabulous. That means everything is not quite up to spec, but when it's holistic like that, that's perfect. So, Disney, at least the parks and resorts, they're living, ongoing experiments in experience, the human condition, how we think, how we behave, and stuff that we do, and that was really intriguing to me. It's like, okay, what's the science behind this? And there is a science behind everything, and you use all of that to help drive traffic, to make people do things you want them to do or experience things that you want to in a specific way. And it dials down to, even as much as, and I always say that here in Haddonfield, that there's a reason why trash cans are where they are. We did a whole study on how long is a person willing to hold on to a piece of garbage before they decide to put it down on the concrete or put it on a park bench. And there's an answer to it. It's 50 feet. So
50 feet. All right.
50 feet from any garbage can, you will find another one. And there it is. And that's all just from observation of masses moving through spaces and how we behave as humans. It doesn't matter if you're from here, from China, from anywhere. All cultures, there's things that, there's connective tissue between all of us. And Disney does a really good job at exploring that.
Favorite project?
I'd have to say, for me, the resorts, working on the resorts was a big deal. And again, that goes back to my childhood. After Dad finished doing Batman, he headlined throughout the 70s in Las Vegas at the hotels. So he met the Sahara and Caesar's Palace and so forth and so on. So I would spend my summers when I wasn't in school with Mom and Dad at these great hotels up in the penthouse while Dad was, down there. And I met a lot of interesting people, including Jackson 5 and Aretha Franklin and all kinds of really cool people along the journey. So I grew up in this world of hotels. So that is what I knew. Vegas in the 1970s. Left such an impression on me. It was totally different than what it is today. It's, from the arrival statement, when you'd pull up and the guys with the white gloves would come out with the big smiles and, welcome you to the hotel, and everybody would dress up to go into the casino. You'd go by the pool and everybody had on white terry cloth robes with the black Ray-Ban Wayfarer glasses. Everybody looked like George Hamilton, all tan, and it was just, it was cool.
It is cool.
It was a cool environment to be in, and as a kid, and this was back when they used to put, when you play the slot machine, you put silver dollars in the slot machine. And, if you hit a jackpot, all this noise and coins, and it was, they'd give you these holders and everything. So as a kid, not being able to game, of course, I'd spend my days out by the pool with my dad's conductor and his drummer's kids, who were my age as well. And we'd go there, and we'd go up to the high diving board. And what we'd do is we'd stand up at the board, and inevitably somebody would get into the pool that left a couple silver dollars in their pocket they were going to use for tips and whatnot. So we'd sit up there in that blazing sun looking down at the bottom of the pool, and you'd see that shimmer, and it's like, let's go! And you run and you jump. Yeah. And, at the end of the day, you got $30. In 1970s, as a 10-year-old kid, you just,
It's $1,000 in cash today.
On bring my car around, sir. I was loaded. It was great. It was all that found money. So there was a lot of magic in those experiences. But because of my stays there, and for as long as I did, and enjoying it so much, I had a thing for hotels and resorts. So I worked on the conceptual development of the Animal Kingdom Lodge and some other projects as well, including Disney Cruise Line, the first two boats, the Magic and the Wonder, which are essentially floating hotels. And those are the ones that really drove me. I mean, I've worked on rides and attractions and things like that as well, and food and beverage and stores and you name it. And even worked on a significant project for the U.S. Navy, which was a really cool project and a big thing, won a lot of awards and so forth and everything. But in terms of my own personal favorites, they were always the hotels and resorts.
Yeah. When how many years was it at Disney as an Imagineer?
Well, I worked in a bunch of different capacities, actually. And I started off, my wife and I, we met in New York City, and we've been together now for 31 years. And
Hey, congratulations, by the way. 31 years is amazing.
I just, every day I'm excited about it. And, best friend, she's my colleague, she's my working partner. We work together, whether it's on our stores or on our projects for hotels and resorts. Because she's a fabulous writer, and we coexist on everything. And it's fabulous. And I'm every day I know I'm super fortunate to have that, because I hear stories of others who aren't as lucky as that. And I'm like, I scratch my head and I can't imagine not having Maria with me. I'm sorry.
I just was looking at time frame for how long you were at Disney.
Disney.
And then,
Yeah. So my wife, born and raised in New York City, Upper West Side. Her mom still lives up there. In fact, in the same place that she grew up in. And we left New York to go do some work in British Columbia, Canada, the ski resort up at Whistler Mountain for a year. We also lived up in Vermont for a year, did some work at Sugarbush, both in the ski industry. And each time we went away from New York, we came back to New York at the conclusion. And then when we'd get back to New York, we're like, I think it's time for us to, let's get out of here. Let's get out of here. And we did. So friends of my folks, they had a place down in Naples, Florida. And I was always interested in, at the time, I was doing a lot of commercial photography. Part of what my studies were at School of Visual Arts. So I figured, let's go down there. I can go and understand Miami a little bit and how it works, and meet some of the agencies and go sit down and show my book around and all that stuff. So Naples puts us close. We got a place. Fabulous. So while we were there, I opened up a photo studio, and I was doing work for Gulf Shore Life magazine and Home and Condo and all these, large format photography. Did a bunch of great work. But then I got a call to come up to Disney to a small group to help them produce some projects for in-park stuff. So I was like, oh, that's fabulous, great. About an hour and a half ride, so drove up to Orlando. I'd stay there overnight at a friend's place, and then I'd head back to Naples. Well, as soon as I finish a project, they're like, well, we got another one. Can you come and do this one? So it started becoming a thing. So we jokingly called it, I've got sort of this perma-Lance position where I'm not part of Disney, but it's one project after another. And enough so where we said, you know what, let's relocate up to Orlando. So we moved to Orlando, and then shortly thereafter I became full-time. And I still communicate with all these folks. And it was a great experience.
Yeah. As I'm listening about the time spent at Disney, and Disney is big business, but I'm finding myself, we're sitting in a small business, your small business, and I can't wait actually to hear this next chunk. If you can connect dots from after Disney, I think of big business, big corporate, to Trading Post, cigar shop, owned by you, ran by you and Maria. Can you connect some dots? I know there's a lot of dots, right? But I can't hit all of them. But if you could hit some major points, I would love to hear how that entrepreneurial spirit actually grew to as I see it today.
Sure. I think when you're in the creative industry, entrepreneurial spirit is there. It's what you do with it, is the next question. It's inevitably if you want to see things differently, if you have a different point of view, if you think outside the box, inevitably you have some sort of an opinion on things. And so being an entrepreneur is a way for you to, let's explore that a little bit. So working for Disney, like I said, when I was a little kid, I always wanted, the idea of a little store. So I left Disney. The last project I did for Disney, I call this my Seinfeld moment. Okay, it's the last project I did for them. I actually helped reinvent how the U.S. Navy trains their recruits. And I created this thing called Battle Stations 21 at Great Lakes, Illinois, at the Recruit Center up there. It's a crucible experience where after 8 weeks of doing your boot camp and so forth, on this very last night, you're woken up in the middle of the night, and for 12 hours, you're going to be run through every single drill that you've learned over the course of the 8 weeks. So I went up there to see this, and a friend of mine who actually worked with Universal Studios. I'm at Disney, he's at Universal Studios. We go together. Let's go up there, let's go watch this thing and see what they do. So we went up there, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, oh dark 100 as they call it, you know, all the petty officers go into the barracks, and lights come on, they blow the horn, they got 30 seconds to get dressed, get up, stand at attention, and then they're brought down to this old barracks that they had. And all the petty officers recreated these sort of mock scenarios inside. They went to Home Depot, they bought 4x8s of plywood and 2x4s, and they created a scene where they call it mass casualties, where there's people down, they got hurt, how do we deal with the situation? So they made all these roughed up sort of things. And they had this one called flooded compartment. The idea was in a certain amount of time, you had to move ammunition from this compartment to this one, and then get the door shut so the watertight seal would go, and then in a certain amount of time. And I thought, okay, that's cool. These guys are all under stress. You know, they've been woken up in the middle of the morning. You know, they have to do this against the clock and everything. And the really cool thing that I saw was that every scenario started with a story. So all the recruits are there standing in front of the makeshift flooded compartment scenario. And the petty officer would stand on a riser and he'd talk to the recruits and he'd tell them a story, in this case about the Indianapolis, you know, about how the torpedoes hit the boat and all these sailors went into the sea and so forth, because, you know, they weren't prepared. It came up to them. So they set it up. And you watch these recruits. A lot of them are 14, 15, 16 years old. They're young kids. They're sitting there and they're listening wide-eyed. He's putting it into context for them. And then all of a sudden they go, okay, now we're going to do the drill. And the scenario would start. And then you'd see these kids, they dive in and they took it with passion. This is what we need to do. Let's get it done. And I'm like telling my friend, I'm like, look at them go. You know, they were really moved by that presentation. So, but their flooded compartment scenario was they had their rooms and there was a hose up over the top with holes in it, and they turned on the water. And so at best it was inconvenient. You know, you were getting spritzed on, you know. My friend and I were looking at each other. I was like, no, this is flooded compartment. I want to see water rising up their legs where, you know, there's a fear, if we don't get this done, we're going to drown. That puts out a better recruit than just this. You lay it up with a story, but then you give them an immersive experience. So literally after we went through this evening of watching them, we went to a pizza place and I took out a pizza box. We ate a pizza, opened it up, and I got out the Sharpie and I started drawing what this thing starts to look like. And I still have that somewhere around that pizza box drawer. But long story short, at the end, they're like, okay, we need to create this thing. So it's Battle Stations 21 using theme park technologies to create this exciting, high-fidelity, dynamic experience for all of the recruits. And ultimately, it was like $90 million to build this thing. You know, it was just, but we would use all theme park gags and stuff like that, where they would, there was story that led up to it, and then they feel like they're in a small room like we're in right now. But all of the walls are that stretched silk, so they're all under tension. So we could flash the lights off, drop the walls in a second, and they're standing in a room that's much larger. So we do things like that, where the walls would disappear, and all of a sudden they're standing in front of a 450-foot Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. You know, we're continuously blowing their mind. They get on board, they untie the ship that seemingly is floating on water, and it's seemingly the boat pulls away from the dock, but we're moving the dock away from the boat instead. So all of these cool visual cues. So we built this thing. It still runs to this day, 365 days a year. We won awards for it, and so forth and so on. And that's when I said, my friends,
Yeah.
I am done.
Yep.
My work is done here.
Yeah.
I'm leaving. And people were like, what are you doing?
Top of your game. What
Yeah,
are you
yeah, I'm
doing,
going. It's like, I'm done. So, and that's what kind of drove me to wanted to focus on hotels and resorts again. I was like, okay, I'm tired of the, you know, Disney was exciting, but it was exhausting as well. So I started to focus in on hotels and resorts. And that's where the change came for me. It's like, okay, I'm going under my own flag. I'm going to be my own brand. and I want to focus on the thing that really drives me, that moves me. And that was ultimately what brought us here to Haddonfield. We moved here. My wife found this town. My mom lives in Connecticut. Her mom lives in New York. But my project was in Atlantic City, and I was the executive creative director for the former Revel Hotel and Resort down there. And it was great fun. Worked with a lot of great people. They called me up and said, Mitch, we need help with interiors and so forth, and our marketing and blah, blah, blah. So we moved up here. We're like, this is great because we're closer to our moms. Brandon's getting into an age now where we'd like to get him a little bit more into the Northeastern school systems and so forth. And then Maria happened to find this place, which was perfect because it was a reverse commute scenario. I'd be going to Atlantic City in the morning while everybody's coming to Philly and then flip-flop. And I never had traffic, Got myself a motorcycle. It's like I'm taking a bike down to work today. Yeah, it's fabulous. And so we loved it. So our son went through the middle school system here and the high school system. And right when he was finishing high school, or middle school rather, here in Haddonfield, the project concluded for me at Revel. It was running, it was operating, and so forth. So I was done. And since he just made all of his friends, we didn't have to hard say, okay, let's move back to Orlando, where you got to go to high school and kind of start over again. So we stayed put. And we rented our house out there, and ultimately we sold it, and we've been here ever since. So we're coming on 9 years of being here in Haddonfield, and it's been great. It's a cool town. It's the traditions and heritage, and it's a little bit of old world. Yet you're very connected to what's current and today, being so close to Philly and New York City. There's the beach, there's the mountains, depending on which way you drive. Its placement is great, and we've met so many great people here. We have so many friends in the short time that we've been here now, and it's great. It's been great fun, And so, with that said, I concluded at Revel. Okay, so here I am now. I'm still consulting for hotel companies and entertainment brands. Perfect time to open the store. So this is how this came to be, like from reinventing the Navy to I got a cigar shop in town.
Yeah. Because it was so cool to sit here, right? Like we did that whole first section. I'm like, I can't wait to see this because I know it came back to when you're a kid. You love to have a little shop, and I'm like, I can't wait to see this puppy land.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah, and it evolves. It slowly comes into. You're never one and done. You don't finish it and open your doors and you're done. I think when you have a creative spirit, it's ongoing evolution. Things always change. And part of that I took from Disney as well. We knew that when Disneyland first opened, Tomorrowland was it futuristic the day it opened. A year later, it wasn't the future anymore. So it had to evolve. It had to go through some change. And those ideas and principles, and you take into your own business. You have to evolve.
Would you say that being that entrepreneur, that creative, is a calling?
I don't know for me if it's a calling. I think it's just part of who I am, and it's because of how I grew up. If people are, if I grew up as the son of a physician, a lawyer, whatnot, but I had this sort of creative spirit in me. But all roads are saying I should pursue this career because that's what I've been exposed to and that's what I know, and I'm going to maybe follow in my father's footsteps or what have you. And then you say, no, I'm not going to do that because I have a calling to be a creative person. But for me, that's all I grew up with. That's all I knew was the creative industry. So I think it's just part of who I am. And it's great, It's not an easy road because you have to carve your own path, And so you have to have that staying power to, it's feast or famine, and you've got to go get your own gigs and so forth and so on. When you do your own thing and you're not working for a company, you will work harder than you ever have in your life. When somebody says, it's Friday, the weekend is here, I'm like, What's that? I had a weekend once. I think I was in high school, you know? And you're always turning it on. And exciting. There's good reward at the end. But it's every day has its challenges of do it. But then as a creative person, that's the fun, is you navigate the obstacles and the challenges, and how do we deal with this in a creative way, you know?
If I could finish with one topic, I would love to hear your perspective on it, hear your heart behind it. When posed with the question, what is success to you at this stage, at this spot? I would love to hear, your view on it.
Well, it's funny. To me, success is subjective. A lot like dealing in high-end hotels and resorts and whatnot. I always tell, I'll often do these keynote presentations for hoteliers, for big companies like Marriott and so forth. And I'll have 200 general managers that are in front of me, and owners and so forth. And I tell everybody that nowadays, especially luxury, is very subjective. To some, luxury is, I have a Rolls Royce, and I go on vacation 7 times a year, and I always buy the finest of goods. You know, that's luxury to them. To others, luxury is no cell phone, my 1964 Volkswagen Bug that I'm parked out on the beach, and I'm going to go surfing for a little bit, and I've got a block of time that's all for me. You know, bare bones. I got a great sandwich here, and what's better than this? This is pure luxury. So success, I think, follows suit. Success to some is, the big house and tangible things and opulence and no worries, from a financial standpoint. But for me, success is, it's really about balance. To me, an enormous success that I know everybody doesn't have is I'm going back to the time that I get to spend with my wife. Where she's the first person I go to if I have a question about something, or I want to know something, or I need some help or guidance, or what do you think, and all that stuff. And to me, that's huge. It's huge. And I look forward to it, all the time. Being able to not have to leave my hometown to work, but to actually be part of the community and talk to the other store owners and sit here with you and have a coffee and chit chat and, and then maintain a living where you can keep the stress down, and keep the engine moving. To me, that's success. It's not, I try not to be heavy on one thing, but it's balance. It's all about balance. And so my success, what I think is success, could be very different than what the next guy sees as success. So it's subjective, but to me, that's what it is. I feel successful being here and have amassed this great number of friends that I have over the last 8 years of being here, being able to be part of the community, being able to participate in it. And my son goes to Temple University. It's I could throw a stone over it and he can catch it. And he comes home on the weekend and stays the night. We have dinner together, and it's fabulous. So I'm like, I wouldn't change any of that. That's great. So
that's awesome.
That's my answer to success.
I love that. Well, Mitch, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being on our podcast. Thank you for being in this community. And thank you for sharing honestly. Thank you for being on.
It's a pleasure. Enjoyed it.
We should do it again sometime.
Whatever you want, Bear.
Whatever you want.
I'm down the road. I'm over here.
I'm right over here. You'll find me. I'm on the bench. Coffee or a cigar.
Yeah, thank you.